So imagine a traffic cop standing right in the middle of a massive, like, 10-lane intersection in a really bustling city.
Oh, wow. Okay. That sounds stressful already.
Right. It is rush hour. The sun is glaring off the windshield. Horns are blaring from every single direction. And pedestrians are just weaving between all the cars.
Just absolute chaos.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But, for a neurotypical brain, that internal traffic cop is actually incredibly efficient at their job.
Yeah, they just sort of handle it.
Right. They see a loud siren coming from the left, a flashing billboard on the right, someone shouting across the street, and all that sensory input is just easily directed into the correct lanes.
I mean, the cop just blows the whistle, waves the cars through, and traffic just flows smoothly. You don't even really think about it.
You really don't. But if you are a parent listening right now, particularly if you have a child with autism or developmental delays, you probably know that visceral feeling of what happens when your child experiences acute distress.
Oh, absolutely.
It is as if that internal traffic cop has completely walked off the job. They just left the intersection entirely unmanaged.
And suddenly, all those lights, the sounds, the internal frustrations, the unmet needs, they just don't stay in their lanes anymore.
No, they all just crash into each other at top speed. It becomes this massive multi-car pileup right in the middle of their brain.
Yeah.
And as a parent standing on the metaphorical sidewalk watching this happen, I mean, your first instinct is usually to just step into the street and yell at the traffic to sort itself out.
You just want the noise to stop, which, I mean, is the most natural human reaction in the world, right?
Absolutely.
When you see chaos, especially when your child is the one stuck right in the middle of it, you want to immediately restore order.
But treating that neurological multi-car pileup like a simple, behavioral traffic violation is exactly where things break down between parents and children.
Yeah, you cannot just issue a ticket and expect the cars to untangle themselves.
And that reality is really the driving force behind our mission today. We are taking a dive into the underlying mechanics of these behavioral pileups.
To completely shift how you see challenging behaviors.
Exactly. We want to clear up the immense confusion separating the myths from the facts about applied behavior analysis, or ABA, and really empower you to confidently advocate for your child's dignity.
And to do that, we are drawing heavily from this incredibly practical resource. It's called The Parent's Guide to Supporting Children with Autism and Challenging Behaviors by Angelique Marshall.
What makes this so grounded is Marshall's specific background. I mean, she holds a master's degree in mental health counseling and brings over 20 years of on-the-ground experience in early intervention and mental and behavioral health.
That 20 years of direct hands-on experience is so vital.
It really is. She develops individualized developmental behavior assessment plans and ABA programs for families. So the advice we are unpacking today is forged in the reality of chaotic living rooms and busy clinics.
Not just distant academic theory. She has seen every possible variation of that multi-car pileup.
Yeah.
She understands the clinical side of autism, like the sensory sensitivities and the communication hurdles. But she is equally focused on the immense psychological toll it takes on you, the caregiver, trying to manage it all.
Right. And before we even touch on therapies or interventions, we have to unpack what is actually happening during these moments. Parents are often, lying awake at 2 a.m, circling around one specific exhausting question.
Why won't they just calm down?
Yes, we view the behavior as a choice the child's making to be difficult.
But Marshall challenges us to reframe that thought immediately. When you ask why they won't calm down, you are implying that they are being defiant on purpose.
Which just isn't the case.
No. The question you should be asking in that moment is my child dysregulated, overwhelmed, or in distress?
Because that reframe fundamentally changes how you view your own child. I mean,
Yeah.
You go from seeing an adversary to seeing someone who is actually in trouble.
Exactly. The core paradigm shift here is that behavior is not intentional misbehavior. Behavior is a form of communication.
So it's them trying to tell us something.
Always. When the demands placed on a child exceed their biological or emotional ability to cope, challenging behaviors emerge. It is their way of communicating something is too hard right now.
And I do not have the vocabulary or the neurological bandwidth to tell you what it is. I always think of it like a home alarm system.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
When the alarm is just blaring at 3 a.m. and you are frantically punching in the code to turn it off, but it just keeps screaming.
And it is so easy to get furious at the alarm itself for malfunctioning and waking up the whole house.
Right. But the reality is, according to this perspective, the alarm system isn't malfunctioning at all.
It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is alerting you to a fire. The issue is that with autism and developmental delays, the fire is often invisible to everyone else.
You just can't see the smoke.
hmm
So what does an invisible fire actually look like for a child?
Well, it could be intense sensory overload from like a humming fluorescent light in the kitchen.
Oh, the ones that we just tune out.
Exactly, but to them it sounds like a literal jet engine. Or it could be the tag on the back of their shirt feeling like sandpaper against their skin.
Yeah.
It could be severe anxiety over a sudden change in routine or just frustration from a basic physical need they can't articulate.
So the resulting behavior, the screaming, the dropping to the floor, the refusal to move, that is the alarm working perfectly to signal that they are in crisis.
Yes. Marshall has this anchor phrase for parents that summarizes this perfectly. My child isn't giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time.
They're having a hard time. Wow. That removes the adversarial dynamic entirely. You are no longer fighting your child.
Right, you are teaming up with them to fight the invisible fire. Understanding the root cause of the behavior is the essential first step before any intervention can even happen.
But, understanding the theory in a quiet room is one thing. The reality of a meltdown is often much, much more intense.
It is terrifying sometimes.
It really is. When communication completely breaks down into something dangerous like aggressive behavior toward a sibling, or self-injurious behavior like headbanging or biting,
Yeah, those are the really tough moments.
the immediate instinct is to ask, how do I stop this behavior right now before they cause damage? And usually that instinct involves punishment or stern discipline.
And Marshall's approach to those dangerous moments is going to challenge a lot of traditional parenting instincts. She says you do not punish.
Okay, so what do you do?
You adopt a completely different mantra. Safety now, skills later.
Walk us through the biology of that. Like, what is actually happening in their brain when they hit that severe red zone?
Okay, so when a child enters the red zone, their nervous system has shifted into full fight or flight mode. The brain perceives a massive threat.
Even if there isn't one.
Right. So it pulls all its resources away from the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical learning part of the brain, and sends it straight to the hindbrain, the primal survival center. What is critical to understand here is that the auditory processing system effectively shuts down.
So they literally can't hear you.
Exactly. So when a parent starts negotiating, explaining, or yelling, "Stop hitting, you know better than this," the child literally cannot process the meaning of those words.
It just becomes more overwhelming sensory noise piling up in the intersection.
It just makes it worse, yeah.
So the protocol is to just minimize words entirely.
Yes. You reduce auditory input. You can use visual supports if the child is already trained on them. But most importantly, you reduce all demands immediately.
You just drop the expectations and focus solely on keeping them physically safe.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to push back here on behalf of parents who are trying to maintain household rules.
Sure, go ahead.
Let's say I ask my child to put their shoes away, and they respond by throwing the shoes and escalating into a full-blown meltdown.
Okay.
If I just let the shoes go and drop the demand, doesn't that teach them that throwing things successfully gets them out of chores? Aren't we rewarding bad behavior?
That is the number one fear parents have when they hear this strategy. It really is.
Because it feels like giving in.
It does, but we have to go back to the neurological reality we just discussed. A dysregulated brain physically cannot learn.
Oh, right. Because the prefrontal cortex is offline.
Exactly. Trying to enforce a boundary or teach a behavioral lesson during a level 10 meltdown only prolongs the fight or flight response.
You are basically talking to a brick wall.
Precisely. Look, if a house is on fire, you don't stand in the burning living room giving a stern lecture about fire safety and playing with matches.
Right, you get out of the house.
You get the child out, you put out the fire, and then hours later, when everyone is calm and safe, you teach the lesson.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you enforce the shoe cleaning demand while they are dysregulated, you are prioritizing compliance over their neurological safety. Safety now, skills later, means you wait until the storm completely passes before you try to teach them the replacement skill.
That reframing actually takes a massive amount of pressure off the parent. You do not have to be the perfect disciplinarian or teacher in the middle of a crisis.
No, your only job is physical safety.
But that brings up the other side of the equation, right? The parent's own physical state.
Oh, this is huge.
Because you cannot effectively regulate your child's nervous system if you are completely drowning in your own panic.
You really can't. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and in these crisis moments, parents are running on fumes.
So what does Marshall suggest for the parents?
She introduces a specific protocol for the adults called stop, breathe, support. And the breathe step isn't just about taking a generic deep breath to calm down.
It's more targeted than that.
It is a highly specific biological tool. You breathe in for 4 seconds and exhale for 6 seconds.
The extended exhale is the key part, right?
Yeah.
Why is that so crucial?
Because when you exhale longer than you inhale, it directly stimulates the vagus nerve, which runs all the way from your brain to your abdomen.
And what does that do?
Stimulating that nerve sends a chemical signal to your brain that you are safe. It physically lowers your heart rate, decreases your blood pressure, and pulls you out of your own fight or flight response.
And a parent's heart rate plays a surprisingly huge role in a child's meltdown because of mirror neurons, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Human beings are deeply wired to co-regulate.
Toddlers and children with developmental delays literally borrow our nervous system to gauge if they are safe.
They look to you. If you rush into their meltdown with a racing heart, a panicked tone of voice, and erratic physical movements.
Your child's brain reads that as, the adult is terrified, we must really be in life-threatening danger.
And their meltdown escalates even further. They are mirroring your chaos.
I always think of the parent as the grounding wire in an electrical system.
That's a good analogy.
When a power stinge happens, like when the child has a meltdown, that grounding wire takes all the excess, dangerous electrical energy and safely disperses it into the earth. But if the parent is frayed, if that grounding wire is broken because they are overwhelmed and dysregulated, the energy has nowhere to go.
It just bounces back into the system, and the whole situation combusts.
That is exactly how co-regulation works. If you are frayed, you cannot ground them.
The stop, breathe, support protocol ensures you repair your own grounding wire before you try to connect with your child.
So let's look at the next phase. The crisis is past, the child is calm, the parent is grounded, the fire is out.
Now we are in the skills later phase.
Exactly. How do we actually teach replacement skills so these massive pileups happen less frequently? This brings us directly to a therapeutic approach that has generated a lot of conversation and honestly a vast amount of confusion.
Applied behavior analysis, ABA.
Yeah, this is where parents often have the most anxiety. The common fears is, isn't ABA just about making my child act normal or changing who they fundamentally are?
It's a very understandable fear based on some outdated practices.
Right. There is a fear that it will strip away their personality and turn them into a compliant robot.
Yeah.
We really need to separate the fear from the facts here.
Ethical, modern ABA does not try to change a child's personality. It does not try to take away their joy.
So what is the actual goal?
It is strictly about building communication, fostering independence, and ensuring safety.
So how does it actually do that? How do therapists find the pattern behind the behavioral pileups?
Modern ABA is built on a framework called the ABCs of behavior.
Okay, let's break that down.
A stands for antecedent, what happened in the environment immediately before the behavior occurred. B is for behavior, what exactly did the child do? And C is for consequence, what happened in the environment immediately after.
This is where we get into the mechanics of the therapy.
Yeah.
Let's walk through an actual timeline of how this works in practice.
Sure.
Let's say we have a child who frequently bangs their head against the wall when it's time to transition from watching a tablet to coming to the dinner table.
Okay, so a traditional outdated approach might just look at the B, the head banging, and try to punish it or forcefully stop it.
Which we know doesn't work.
Right. But an ethical ABA approach looks at the entire ABC pattern. Week 1 is mostly just observation. The therapist and parent track the data.
Looking for the A and the C?
Exactly. What is the antecedent? Is the transition too fast? Is the kitchen too loud? Then they look at the consequence. When the child bangs their head, does the parent get scared and let them keep the tablet?
Because that would reinforce it.
Yes. The goal isn't to control the child, it's to translate what that head banging is actually communicating.
In this case, it might be communicating, I am overwhelmed by this sudden transition and I need more time.
And once you translate the meaning, you can teach a replacement skill.
Moving into week 2 and 3, you start teaching that skill during calm moments, not during a crisis.
Right, because they can't learn in a crisis.
Exactly. Instead of the child banging their head to delay the transition, the therapist might teach them to hand the parent a physical break card. Or they might use a first-then visual board.
Let's unpack the visual boards because Marshall highlights them as incredibly effective tools.
Yeah. What actually goes into creating and using a first-then board?
It is remarkably simple but neurologically brilliant. It is just a small physical board divided into 2 sections.
Okay.
The first side has a picture of the less preferred task like say a picture of a dinner plate. The then side has a picture of a highly preferred activity or a reward like a picture of a favorite toy.
And why does a picture work better than just telling them, first eat dinner, then you can have the toy?
Because visual processing utilizes a completely different neural pathway than auditory processing. As we established, when a child is stressed, spoken words just sound like noise.
Right, the auditory system shuts down.
Exactly. But a visual image remains static, clear, and easy to process at their own pace.
You are giving them a predictable map of what is going to happen next, which drastically reduces their anxiety.
And over the course of a month, the child learns that handing over the break card or following the first then board gets their needs met much more efficiently than headbanging ever did.
You replace a dangerous behavior with a safe communication tool that achieves the exact same result for the child. You don't take away their coping mechanism.
You upgrade it. Precisely.
Let's do a deeper dive into some of the myths versus facts surrounding ABA, because there is a lot of outdated information out there.
There really is.
One of the biggest myths is that ABA forcibly stops all stimming.
Let's define stimming first. It is short for self-stimulatory behavior.
Like what kind of actions?
It includes actions like hand flapping, rocking back and forth, or repeating phrases. These behaviors are vital emotional regulation tools.
They provide the brain with predictable sensory input when the outside world feels chaotic.
Right. So the fact is, respectful, modern ABA does not target harmless stimming.
If a child needs to flap their hands to regulate their joy or their anxiety, an ethical therapist will never try to extinguish that.
They will only intervene if the stimming behavior is physically dangerous, like biting their own arm or hitting their head.
Another pervasive myth is that ABA heavily relies on punishment.
The fact is, modern ABA prioritizes positive reinforcement. It is about catching the child doing something right and rewarding it, rather than penalizing them for lacking a skill.
Like our example with the first then board, it is about empowering them to successfully transition so they can access their reward.
And finally, there's the myth that ABA is just a child sitting at a sterile table doing rigid, repetitive flashcard drills for hours on end.
The reality, especially for young children and toddlers, is that quality therapy is entirely play-based. It is called natural environment teaching.
Yeah, if a therapist is teaching a child to request a specific item, they aren't going to do it at a desk.
They are going to be down on the living room floor, playing with building blocks, waiting for the child to show interest in a block, and then guiding them to use a word or a gesture to ask for it.
It should look like highly structured, intentional play.
It is important to acknowledge why these fears exist in the first place, though. Early pioneers of ABA, going back decades, shaped a field that was very different and, in many cases, heavily compliance-driven.
Oh, definitely. But the field has evolved massively. Today, best practices dictate neurodiversity-affirming care, trauma-informed approaches, and a deep respect for the child's autonomy.
But because the field of ABA is so vast and lightly regulated in some areas, the actual practice can still vary wildly from clinic to clinic.
Which brings us to the advocacy side of things.
Right. How do you, as a parent, evaluate a provider? What specific questions should you be asking? And what warning signs should prompt you to walk away?
Well, Marshall provides a very clear red flag versus green flag framework for parents. You are your child's best advocate, and you need to know what to look for.
I imagine a major red flag is if the therapy looks identical for every single child who walks through the clinic doors.
Oh, a massive red flag. Autism is a spectrum. The therapy must be highly individualized to the specific child's needs and sensory profile.
Another warning sign is if the clinic's focus is entirely on compliance.
If their goals are strictly about making the child obey commands without question, rather than building functional communication skills, you should be very concerned.
We mentioned stimming earlier. If a provider is actively suppressing harmless stimming, like telling a child they have to have quiet hands at all times when they aren't hurting anyone, that is a huge red flag.
You should also watch out for high staff turnover, a lack of transparency when you ask to see the data they are collecting, or if your child's continuous distress during sessions is brushed off as normal.
Therapy should not look like continuous torture. Now let's look at the green flags.
You want a provider whose goals are deeply collaborative with your family. The therapists respect your child's emotions and their bodily consent.
This is known as assent-based therapy, right?
Yeah. Yes. If a child communicates no or shows clear signs they need a break, the therapist honors that boundary. The data is shared with you openly, and the focus is squarely on teaching real-world life skills.
And those green flags shift as the child gets older, right?
Significantly. For teenagers, a green flag is that they are actively participating in their own therapy meetings and setting their own goals.
Therapy at that age should be about building healthy boundaries, self-advocacy, and preparing them for real-world autonomy.
You absolutely cannot teach a teenager true independence by dictating their every move in a clinical setting.
I want to highlight a point from Marshall's text for you, the listener,
Yeah.
because it is so empowering. You are allowed to ask hard questions.
Yes. When you are sitting in an intake meeting with a medical professional, it can feel incredibly intimidating.
But you have the right to ask, do you use any punishment-based strategies? You have the right to refuse a specific intervention if it does not align with your family's core values.
If you push back on a therapist's suggestion, you are not being a difficult parent. You are doing your job.
Your lived day-to-day experience with your child is just as valuable as their clinical degree. Good providers will welcome your questions and treat you as an equal partner.
Ultimately, everything we have discussed today points back to one core truth. Behavior is a language.
And when you are faced with a challenging behavior, your goal isn't to forcefully silence the child. Your goal is to translate what they are trying to say.
By staying calm, by taking those deep breaths to repair your own grounding wire, by utilizing tools like visual choice boards, and by seeking ethical, skill-focused professional support, you can help your child thrive.
If you are exhausted right now, please know that you are not failing. You are simply learning a complex new language alongside your child.
It is messy, it is incredibly hard work, but it is deeply worth it, and you don't have to learn that language without a dictionary.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. If you want to understand exactly how to implement the tools we discussed today, how to build those first-then boards, how to set up visual routines, and how to execute specific step-by-step crisis protocols in your own home, you need to get your hands on the Parent's Guide to Supporting Children with Autism and Challenging Behaviors by Angelique Marshall.
It is packed with actionable visual toolkits.
You can purchase the book and also explore her unique augmented reality children's books by going to angels-awesomebooks.com. Again, that website is angels-awesomebooks.com.
Her work truly bridges the gap between complex behavioral theory and the practical reality of parenting.
As we wrap up this, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. Throughout this entire conversation, we've talked about therapies building independence for your child.
But society often defines independence as a child's ability to perfectly blend in.
We expect them to mask their discomfort, to sit completely still in a crowded restaurant, and to look and act just like everyone else.
We often define a child's success by how invisible their struggles are to the rest of the world.
But what if we completely redefine independence? Think back to that multi-car pileup in the intersection of their brain.
What is true independence for your child isn't about perfectly mimicking neurotypical behavior.
What if true independence is simply knowing how to safely hand you a brake card to signal for help when the sensory traffic gets to be too much?
That changes the entire goal of therapy. It means the objective isn't to force them to act like the intersection is perfectly clear.
The objective is just to make sure they know how to call for backup. Something to think about. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions.